Thank you all for coming. I know it's a big ask on a Friday afternoon. It's the last thing anybody wants to do is to stay in school, especially on that coveted week B. It is week B, right? Yeah. So thank you all for coming. I'm really honored to be asked to be here, and I'm also very excited to share with you something that was some very special information that I was given when I was in university. As soon as I went to this, I thought, I wish I had this earlier. This would have made my whole life and all my studies so much easier. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, great. We'll just avoid the microphone. So I was in university. I started as an art major, and then I went into medicine. I'm a chiropractor and a neurologist. That's my specialty. And when I was making that transition from being an artist to being a doctor, my study time started to get much more complex and much more time and energy and intellectually intensive. And I happened on a little flyer on a wall that said, "Do you want to learn how to learn more effectively?" And it was a 1-hour talk one evening. And I went to this talk, and there were 5 points that they told us that completely changed everything for me. So has anyone ever had the experience when you're reading something, you're studying, and when you're reading and you go and you turn the page and then you realize that you have no idea what you had just read? Yes. Has anyone ever felt that? Okay, great. So what we have is a cure for that. Okay. So as a neurologist, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the brain works as well. So I hope you find that interesting, but I'm only going to tell you as much as I need to tell you, but also I'm going to use a little bit of lecture as an example of how you can use some of these study tools. So first we're going to talk about some of the study tools, how they work, and then I'm going to give you some examples of how that is going to make a difference for you. So one of the biggest things is really your attention. So when you are presented with information that you've never heard before, sometimes it just kind of feels like it bounces off of you. And I'm sure like the book, you've been in a lecture where the person's talking and they're just talking like this, and it's almost like they're going, rah, rah, rah. You can't understand anything that they're saying. You have no idea the context or how anything fits together, okay? And that's really one of the biggest key issues that we need to resolve first, is about how to get your brain so that it can actually start to absorb that information. So if we look at information as almost a series of like little data points, okay? The teacher might be telling you a story, but you're just hearing little bits of information, and you can kind of miss the story as well. So if we can get some data points into our head first, then what will happen is it will make you a little bit aware of those things so that when you hear them again, they sound familiar, okay? Your brain likes to hear things and experience things that are familiar. So what we're first going to do is just a little bit of an exercise. So I want everyone to keep your eyes open, because the first 45 slides are going to go by in about a minute, okay? So just pay attention. Okay, so the notes are your hub. Anyone see all this? So what was I doing there? Basically, all of those words were actually just little data points about what we're going to be talking about today. Okay? I didn't give you enough time to even think about those things, but you've seen them, and every one of you has all of those 45 points in your head, in your short-term memory right now. So when I say something like calibrate, okay, or I say aha, it sounds a little familiar to you. Okay, so you're going to listen a little bit more when you hear something that sounds a little bit familiar. Okay, so one of the first things is to figure out how it is that our brain works. How do we learn? We learn by taking in information and taking that information into our current way of looking at things. Has anyone ever heard the word paradigm? You know what a paradigm is? A paradigm is just simply the way that you look at things. Okay, you can even have like a cultural paradigm, the way people in your culture look at things and do things, and people from other cultures do things in other ways. And when you're learning a science, or you're learning a math, or you're learning about poetry, these are all different paradigms and different ways of looking at things, different ways of assembling information and sharing information. And so whenever you're taking in new information, you're going to kind of put on your science hat or put on your literature hat, and you're going to be analyzing it from the way that you currently look at things. So that can be a great thing, but it can also be a challenging thing, because what you're experiencing right now is classes that are of a higher caliber with greater breadth and greater depth than you've probably ever experienced before, right? Is anyone starting to get a little flavor of that? Okay, yeah. So when you are really studying a subject, as you are in high schoolers, as preparation for a university, you have to be able to broaden your scope. In order to do so, you have to also broaden your paradigm. You have to have a mind that's open to seeing things from a different perspective, okay? This is a key element. Another thing that we have to do is to try to, again, create some context. So what we're going to do is the first tool that we're going to use is to try to make our brains a little bit stickier, okay? Which is kind of a weird word, but it's one that I think is quite a good word, because it's going to keep you from things bouncing off, okay? So learning is not simply remembering. Learning is conditioning the mind to receive a great breadth and depth of information and to find novel applications for it. So it sounds like big words, but what am I saying there? What I'm saying is there's a lot more in front of you, and it just goes super deep, and you need to learn all of it and put it together and to be able to use it. Okay, that's all, right? Shouldn't be that hard. But learning is an experience. If it's just information being thrown at you, it's very hard to receive it. You need to understand it as an experience. So all of our experiences in our lives happen through the course of time and happen almost as a story. Whatever your experience is, you could share that experience like you're sharing a story. And your teachers and your lecturers are sharing stories with you. So in order for you to be able to interact and connect with that story, you have to have some level of interest in that story. So it's got to be fun, right? Anything that's fun, you're going to connect to. Anything that you find engaging, you'll connect to. So we have to use some tricks, okay? Because unfortunately, not everything you're going to find super interesting, okay? So we have to try to make it interesting. We have to try to turn up the alertness of our brains. So the way that your brain works is you have information that's coming in, information from lots of receptors. You have your vision, your touch, your movement, all of these receptors are going in, and your brain is kind of interpreting where you are, okay? All that information comes in, you kind of get a sense of where you are. I'm standing on a stage in front of a bunch of people in a very hot room, and then your brain puts all these different types of receptors together in your brain and creates an image. It's almost like there's a map in there, and all these little plots, all these little sensations are like little plots on the map. We create an integrative sense of where we are, and then once we know where we are, then we can have control of our body and move things. And very much the same thing with learning as well. Learning is all these data points that are coming in, and you have to be able to assemble that into a concept or a map of what it is that you're talking about. You know, people just go, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm lost. You're lost because you don't have any map, okay? So again, step one is going to be about starting to assemble a map. So a good example is if, for instance, you went to a city that you'd never been to, and you just walked out of the train station in the middle of the city, and you have an address for your hotel, and you know kind of some of the places you're going to see in the next few days, but you haven't seen any maps. If you start wandering around, you're just immediately going to feel overwhelmed and lost, okay? However, if before you went to the city, you looked at the map, okay? You looked at where the train station was, and you looked at where your hotel was, and you looked at all the other things you were doing, okay? That would help a lot, because then you would start recognizing things. If you even looked at some of the things that were along the roads that you'd be walking along on the way to the hotel, then that would be one step further to prepare you for that new information, that new place, okay? You guys starting to understand the metaphor here? to do is we need to start creating some data points for you to be able to understand what's coming. Okay, that was exactly what we did in those first 45 slides. Is these are just little data points that we're going to talk about. So let me tell you what's going to happen. The process is we're going to maybe that one. It's going to tune your brain to be more perceptive. We need to become as perceptive as possible. You're going to we're going to give you context before you hear the lecture. So you're going to essentially build some points on the map before you hear anything. And then when you hear that thing that you saw the data points from, you're going to go, ah, that's what they're talking about. Okay? So if I say, change your perspective, reflect, these are things that you saw a moment ago. Like reflect means something to you because you just read it, right? So when it means something to you, you go, ah, aha, and it keeps your interest level up. And it also readies you for effectively reading your resources. So in other words, you're gonna be going to your talk, and then you're also gonna have to study that and read your textbook or whatever the resources you have. And if you have some familiarity with it, the lecture and which you've been more kind of connected to, and then when you read the book, you're going to be more connected to that as well. And there's a few tools in the middle of that as well. It's also going to enable you to retain and make use of the information. So this is really a key because, again, we don't want things to just sort of bounce off us. Okay? Does that sound like a tall order? But I promise, money back guarantee, I'll deliver. Okay? Okay, great. And much more. So the first step is skimming. So skimming makes your brain sticky. What is skimming? Has anyone ever done skimming or heard of skimming? A lot of people, okay. So what skimming is basically letting your eyes go over a lot of information very quickly. And what happens is your eyes are going to pick up certain things, okay? And when you hear it again, it's going to make it sound familiar. So we've said that many times. This is one of the keys. But there's some really cool techniques for how to skim. So we'll go through some of those now. Well, actually, I'll tell you why we're going to skim. So it drives your alertness, makes you more alert and aware, gives you data points, it goes into your short-term memory, and it also generates questions because when you're just given them a moment of a piece of information, like all those 45 slides, those little moments of information, but they're actually questions in your mind. Why did I see that? What was the relevance of that? And if it's in a textbook, you're going to be thinking to yourself, what is the relevance of ionic bonds and valence and all this stuff? I hear all these words, I see these graphs. What does all that mean? Okay? So when you have a question and then someone gives you the answer, you can receive it. It's the difference between standing there to catch the ball like this or just standing there like this and the ball hits you and bounces off. So what we're going to do is a little exercise, and we're going to be looking for words that stand out. Okay, so what's kind of how would you approach a textbook or something that has some words that stand out? What would be words that stand out?
Like a title?
Yeah, titles, very good. What other words stand out?
Headings and words that have been like symbols and
exactly.
Definitions.
Very, very good. So words that are headings and words that are characterized in some other way. They're bold, they're italic, they're underlined. Okay, these sort of things. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little exercise. I'm going to show you a page with some notes, just some things that I wrote. And what I've done to help you is I've made the words that I want you to look at red. I put like a red highlight on them. We're just going to look at this page for about 10 seconds, and I only want you to look at the red words. Okay? Everyone ready? Okay? It's going to be about here. Okay? How's that? Sure. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds. Okay, so that was a text about something. Okay? Now if you were to read that, just those few words, and then I give you a short little talk, which I'll do in a moment, you probably have a clearer idea of what I'm going to be talking about. Does anyone have any idea what I'm talking about now? Show me some words that you saw. Fish brain, nervous system, yeah. Yeah, horizontal, yeah. I saw vertical in there. Anyone see vertical? What else? Was that? Receives, yeah.
Higher cortical centers.
Yeah, higher cortical centers, okay. So, yeah. Which one? Transmits, okay. So what do you think that text was about? About the brain? And about, well, there's horizontal, there's vertical, there's fish, there's, all these sorts of things. We're talking about something about brain function, right? So I'm going to give you a talk in just a moment about some of these things, and I want you to try to see how it feels having a few little data points. Okay? Before we do that, I'm going to show you the same text again, but we're going to go to an intermediate level. Okay, so we're going to amp up. You've all graduated beginner skimming. Okay, well done. Now we're going to do intermediate skimming. What's intermediate skimming? Super fast. Okay, super fast. Okay, but what you need to do is something different. Okay, what you're doing is intermediate skimming. I'm going to give you more time, so don't panic. But what you're going to do is let your eyes go over all of the words. Okay, we're intermediate skimming. You're going to go over all the words, but as fast as you can. Do not try to read the words. Do not try to understand what your eyes are seeing. Just force yourself to make your eyes go as fast as you can across the words. Okay, so all of the words that are going to be in yellow, you're going to go really fast. Okay, and that's what that is you're going to see words at the beginning and the ends of the paragraph that are in yellow. So you want to be going pretty fast at the beginning and the end, but in the middle, you're going to go super fast. Okay? So as fast as you think you can go, you're going to go even faster in the middle. It's almost like you're skipping over it completely, but you do have to do it with your eyes open. Because what this is doing is this is actually amping up your brain. Okay? This exercise turns your brain and just switches up the voltage. Okay? It makes you're forcing your brain to be more alert. Okay? Because your brain wants to figure things out. Okay? It doesn't like a whole bunch of confusing stuff. So when you force yourself to go through things quickly, it will naturally be confusing. You don't have enough processing time to understand everything. So in a way, your brain's not going to be super happy with this, okay? But you have to work at it, okay? This is a skill. Today's day one, already intermediate level, well done. And it's going to be hard, but you have to do this as fast as you possibly can. Now, the reason is because you don't want to, when you try to process it, you're going to add confusion, okay? Because you're not going to, if you're skimming too slow, you're going to start to pick up too much, and you're going to start thinking, and you're going to stop, okay? And what it's going to leave you with is some level of confusion. You don't want confusion, you just want simply exposure to the information, exposure to those words, so that it just leaves a nice, simple, clean question, okay? So when you skim super fast, you see lots of stuff, you don't understand anything, that's exactly the way it should be, but you get through the information quickly, lots of data points, okay? Everyone ready? Yellow, you're gonna go fast, that's the beginning and ends of the paragraph, so I've already done the hard work for you, okay? And the green, you're gonna go even faster than that.
What is the thing gonna be?
It's gonna be over here. Same place, same text. It's all the same text, okay? You ready? Here we go. Okay, 5 more seconds. Get through it. All the way to the bottom. Ready? Done. Okay? Did everyone make it to the bottom? Okay, everyone, 5 more seconds? Go back to where you were in another 5 seconds, okay? Try to get your eyes just to go over the words. You're not trying to understand it, just go over the words. Sometimes you can try. Okay, here's a little tip. Expert skimming, I'll give you one tip, more than one line at a time. Okay, so don't just read across one line and go to the next line. Just let your eyes go across 2 or 3 lines at a time and go in chunks like this. Okay, expert level, we can do it. Oops. Go. It's hard, isn't it? It's really, really hard, okay? You should be able to skim a 30-page chapter in about 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes. So when you start, just do it as fast as you can and see how long it takes. And then just keep, you don't have to time yourself, but just try to always skim faster, because the faster you skim, the better it's going to be, because the faster you skim, the more you're opening up your attention. Okay? So now what we're going to do is I just want to tell you a little bit about how the brain works. Okay? Oh, actually, no, sorry. Before we do that, I'm going to do one more thing. There's one other thing you do when you're skimming is you're going to find all kinds of other stuff in there. You're going to find graphs, tables, charts. And whenever you have a graph or a table, you're going to have a key, which is like a little explanation of what it is. Okay? And yeah. Nope. You just let your eyes go over it. So let me just explain. It's a great question. So what happens when you're reading is, I'll put it this way. If something goes by like this and my eyeballs don't move, all I see is blur, right? So the way that you read is what your eyes do is they go, boom, take a picture. And then your eyes do a fast movement. It's called a saccade. They do a jump to the next word or words, and then they go jump, jump, jump. So when you're reading words, what your eyeballs are doing is going jump, 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 jump. Okay, that's the normal way that you read. And your brain is actually seeing little snapshots, okay, little pictures. So what we're doing when we're skimming is you're actually trying to go and open up what you're seeing instead of seeing one word at a time. Like when kids are reading, they read really slow. Mary walked down the trail, right? You see one word at a time. But when you read as an adult, it's more fluid because you don't realize it, but you're seeing several words at a time. So it can all flow very nicely. So you have a question? Yeah. Not 30 chapters, 30 pages.
Okay, 30 pages. Same thing. Like, I was just wondering, like, if you did that, and then you would ask me what it was about, I don't think I would be able to.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that. This is step 1. We have 5 more steps. So don't panic, okay? Everyone's like, there's no way I can do this. I'm not going to remember any of that. Absolutely, you're not going to remember it, okay? All that this is doing is this is preparing you for the lecture. So we're doing the skimming, and then I'm going to lecture, okay? I'm going to explain how you do this in the real world soon. But to answer your question quickly, the best way to start applying step number 1 is before your class, if you know what your class is going to be about, if it's math, whatever, you know what questions he's going to be talking about, what kind of theories or what kind of types of challenges, okay? What types of equations. So you're going to look at that part of the book and skim that part of the book, okay? So you just see it in your see it before you. Oh, by the way, I want to remind you to turn your phones off. So I just forgot to turn mine off. All it's doing is preparing you for the lecture. That's all. This is not a long-term memory thing. It's literally just opening your mind up. So again, you're going to see lots of things in the chapter as you're going through, and when you get to those things, you stop. You stop skimming, and you look at the picture, you look at the diagram, and you read the key, and you try to understand what it's showing you. Okay? You just look at it and you try to understand it. And actually, you're probably going to see some of the same words you just read. Okay? So it's going to give you a little bit of context. Okay? Also, one other thing is at the end of the chapter, there's going to be some questions. Read those questions. Okay? You probably won't have any idea how to answer those questions, but read the questions. Okay? These are valuable tools because, again, the data points we're using as questions to keep us interested. So, images. Look at all the images, graphs, and tables. Read the key, try to figure out what it's about. So, What if a fish could stand? Do they have a mechanism to resist gravity out of the water? Huh?
No.
What does that mean? Is there a monkey brain inside your brain? What else is in there? Can you smell a fish? Does verticality expose us to greater gravitational load? How does this drive evolution of the brain? Okay. 1 year to conquer gravity. How do environmental stresses drive evolutionary changes? Okay? Did any of that sound a little bit familiar to what you read? Some of the little data points we talked about. You saw some people saw things about fish. Some people saw vertical. Some people saw gravity. Some people saw load and potentials. Okay. Do you see that sort of stuff? Okay. So what we've just done is you have just done step 1. Okay. This is just one example of step 1 of how you skim before you have a lecture. Okay. So it's really, really important to do this exercise before you go to class. Okay, so this is class prep. And like I said, when you're doing this well, it should only take 2 minutes. When your teacher gives you a syllabus or you have an idea of what's going to be covered in each class, it makes it a lot easier because you can just say, oh, Mr. Whatever, Mrs. Whatever, what are we talking about today? They'll say chapter 12, and you go, great. You sit down at your desk and go, bloop, 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 bloop. Chapter 12, boom, lots of data points. They start telling you about that chapter 12, it's going to be a lot easier. Okay? So I'm going to tell you just take a little bit of a departure and give you an example of what skimming does to your brain when you hear some information. Okay? So I'm going to take a moment and tell you about one of my favorite subjects, something I'm very passionate about. My wife says obsessed, but I say passionate, is neurology and how the brain works. So one of the things I think is quite fascinating is that the brain is structured in layers and levels. You know what that means? Layers and levels. So what layers and levels are, or actually, no, I think I need to tell you something. It's important to the aha. So what are the goals of the lecture? We'll do this first. You're going to become familiar with the context and the content in the context. You're going to start making connections between all those data points. You're going to follow the story. You'll be listening for potential applications. Like what does this mean? How would I use this? And you're also going to be writing down key points. We'll do that next, how you take notes. So when you take notes, you're going to do things like writing the words, you're going to draw, you're going to diagram, bullet point, whatever your style is, and we'll go into that in a second. So, fish brains. So what does that mean? So the nervous system is structured in layers and levels. So what does that mean? Layers, it's like an onion. Okay, you have inner layers and you have outer layers, and you have levels, like a whole bunch of blocks stacked on top of each other. What is the relevance of it? Very interestingly, if you start looking at the deeper and deeper levels, we end up seeing more parallels between the deepest layers of our brain, okay, like the inner parts of the onion, are really the same thing as a whole fish brain. Okay, so a fish has the same structure. Basically, the whole of the fish structure is like the core of our structure. And what we have is new parts of our nervous system that are stacked on top. So fish has quite simple things. Find food, shelter, find a mate, simple stuff like this, okay? And it needs to know which way is up, okay? And how do I get to all these things and avoid all the things I need to avoid, right? So we have, a fish has a system where it has sensory information that's coming in through its vision, through what we call the vestibular system, which is like your little balance organ in your inner ear, and also sensors in and around its spine, okay? So as the waves are pushing it around, it has sensors that can see its world tilting. It can sense its world tilting from this vestibular system in its inner ear, and it can also sense itself being moved through the motion of its little fish body, right? So what that's going to do is going to feed into the brain, and it's going to allow it to know where it is, okay, so that it can then move and go somewhere else. Now, how does that relate to the structures in us? Well, we have the same thing. We have the same capacity to sense our world, to perceive our world, and to react to our world, okay? But we have a different type of a system where we're also standing up. So how does that work? How do we end up standing up, going from fish to being standing? Well, we have to develop the capacity to resist gravity, right? So what we end up doing is starting to to develop and use other muscles to try to get ourselves from fish to like lizards that can then pick their heads up and run around to other types of animals that can get more and more upright, okay? Cats, dogs, and then you have things like bears and other animals that can stand up on two legs. They have a different capacity to sense gravity and to respond to gravity, okay? And so these are sort of some of the key elements that are in fish that also exist in us, okay? Did anyone hear any of those things that I was saying there that were familiar with what you saw in the text when we skimmed? Yep. Yep. Yep, exactly. Yep. Exactly. Okay. So even though it might not have been something that you're super interested in, you probably can catch a little bit more of that when you had an experience of having some data points to sort of hang your hat on, if you will. Does everyone get that? Does that sound cool? So this is sort of a key element. Whenever you go into a lecture, you want to make sure that you're trying to get as many data points before you get to lecture as possible. So the next thing is, so step one is skimming. That primes your brain. Step two is the lecture. And what you do in the lecture is you also take notes. So step two is listening, but also taking notes. How many people just write everything down? Like most of us will try to write everything down, right? That's wrong, okay? Don't do that. It sounds crazy, but for some people, you might want to do that. For most of us, what you really want to be doing is just listening to the story, okay? Listen to how all the things that you read in your data points, in your skimming, and everything that the teacher is telling you there, how it all fits together. Ask yourself those questions I just showed you. What is the use of this information? How does all this stuff tie together? Okay? And so you want to try to see how things tie together. And when you write your notes, what I would suggest is that you write your notes really kind of loose and open, because what you're going to do later is fill in more detail. Okay? Everyone has a different style. Some people like to draw things. Some people like to do bullet points. My notes look different. I'll show you mine in a moment. So how engaged were you with that lecture? It was just a small little lecture, hopefully a little bit more engaged. Could you sense the questions that were in your mind and when they were answered? Okay? Maybe? Was that easier to listen to than if you hadn't prepared? Probably. I'm sure none of you care about fish brains and human brains and the relationships between them, but hopefully hearing a little bit of that tunes you to it. And what would your notes look like? Okay, what kind of things would you have written down? Okay, hopefully you hear a little bit of the story and have a little bit of an idea. This is what my notes look like. So this looks really terrible and messy, but this is an example. I like to type because I can type faster than I can write. So I type things down. I also like to draw things, and then sometimes I pull in media and stuff. So has anyone ever seen Notability? Notability, anyone? Yeah? Quick has? Yeah. Notability? No? If you have Apple or an iPad, check out Notability. It's an amazing, amazing app. And what you do is, at the beginning of a lecture, you hit record up here, and it actually starts recording the audio of the lecture. And then as you're writing your notes, it's logging when your notes are going in. So you can see here on the timeline at the top, this is where it is in the lecture, and you see how these are black and these are gray, because this is what the teacher's talking about right now at this point in the timeline. You get it? So when you go back through your notes, you can go and you say, well, I want to learn about Birkbeck and balance diagnostics. All you do is just grab that little scrub thing and you slide it along until that turns black. You let go of the button and then you hear what they're talking about. Okay? It's a cool tool, right? So use clever tools. Use tools to make your life easier. Writing things down, I feel, kind of separates you from the whole story. You're just trying to get down details, and it's sometimes hard to see the big picture if you're busy just trying to write everything, all the words down word for word. However, for some people, it's a good way to kind of just get as much information as you possibly can. So Everyone has to find their way. I'm not going to tell you how to find your way. There's tons and tons of resources on how to take notes, but generally, I promise you, most people will say, don't try to write everything down. Just try to listen and find a way to highlight the things that are important. So that could be just simply putting down bullet points. Write down a word, draw an arrow to the next word. Okay, draw an arrow to the next one. Okay, so this is basically how we take notes. Okay, there's lots of different ways, and you're going to have to find your own. So step 3 is review your notes. So this is probably the easiest one to not do. And what it means is that after the lecture, after your teacher's class, you look at your notes and you read through the notes. And as you're reading through the notes, the only thing you have to do is to think about what the teacher was saying at that time. Think about what was on the board. Think about the kind of progression of the information. Okay? Try to put yourself back in the space of the lecture as you read through your notes. Does anyone understand why that would be valuable? Because the notes are your hub. Your notes are your hub. It's the place where you're going to have all of your information aggregated. Okay? So you're going to write down the basic concepts in your class, then you're going to review it. And when you do this, what it's going to do is you're going to read back through this as soon as possible and think about what you heard. And what it does is it's going to lock in the connection of all those data points. Okay? Because you're thinking about the flow. You're reading through the notes, which is the flow, and you're thinking about the flow of that lecture. It sounds silly, but I promise you, this is one of the most valuable steps. Okay? It only takes 2 to 3 minutes, but it's super, super important. If it's impossible to do it right after the class finishes, then do it as soon as you can afterwards. Maybe when you're waiting for the next class to start, okay? Or you have a little break. Maybe there's a little break in school, go back to the notes and think about it. But try not to let hours go by. It's definitely something you want to do before you get very far away, okay? Don't let hours go by, at the most minutes, okay? It's very, very, very important. Everyone understands why, right? It's super important. Okay, so what it does is it actually raises further questions because you're going to have kind of some of the information, you're going to have the perspectives of your teacher, but you don't have all the information. Your teacher is not the textbook, okay? Your textbook should have the full breadth and the full depth of the information. Your teacher is trying to give you a little bit of context, trying to give you enough information that you can tie things together and make it usable, but also prepare you for the things that they think are the most important. So it's important that you hear that, but it's also going to raise questions about, well, what's missing in this situation? You don't necessarily have to have that question in your mind, but when you read through those notes, you're going to kind of see what you do know and what you don't know. Then you chill, okay? And this is the best part. So between step 3 and step 4, you got a little break, okay? You have some hours, but not more, not days. You have some hours to chill. And what's going to happen is in your mind, all these little concepts are just going to be percolating. It takes no effort on your part, but you've experienced some information several times. You had your skimming. You had the lecture that you're hopefully more engaged in, okay? You're hearing more of those points. You're also writing down the things that feel the most important. You've reviewed all of those things, okay? And then you've given your mind and your sort of subconscious mind an opportunity to think, what in that was important, okay? What in that do I understand and what in that don't I understand? Okay, so just kind of imagine being in that space. That's where you are. The end of the day's come. You've gone home, time to study, okay? And you're in this space, okay? You're in a space of receptivity and questioning. So, read the resources, fill in the details. So now is when you read the book and you try to comprehend the book. So, your questioning is at its peak right now because you have enough information to be able to ask a good question. You know, you have some context. The information is going to, that fits into recently discovered context. So as you're reading information, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get this. I know what this is. I know where I am. It's very different than if you just picked up the book and tried to drag your eyeballs across it, right? And this is where you add to the bulk of your notes. So when I was saying, when you take your notes, however you take your notes, leave space in your notes, because when you get home, do it like this. You have your textbook and you have your notebook, and you read your textbook and you look at your notes. And what I usually do is I look at my notes before I read the textbook, and then I also quickly flip through the textbook again before I read it. And then what I'll do is I'll start reading the textbook, and I think of where I want to put it in my notes. Okay? And I leave enough space that I can put all the information in there. So my notes are going to be basically are going to be taken, or an aggregation of everything else and what I'm reading. Everyone understand why that's important? Because you're practicing this information. You're absorbing it, and you're trying to express that information. Okay? So in order to be able to express it in your notes and do it well, you have to understand it. So you have to strive for understanding when you're reading it, and to be able to express it. It's an exercise, and it's when you practice it, that's when you're going to learn it. So also in your notes, when you're reading the book, you're going to see new diagrams, you're going to see new pictures, you're going to get ideas and concepts and start stringing things together. You make your own diagrams, whatever it is. If it's the Krebs cycle or something, that's a fun one. Draw it out, write the whole thing out, okay? Diagram it, bullet point, highlight, whatever works for you. Write in your book if you can, okay? I like that too. Underlining, highlighting, whatever works for you, okay? So the notes will be the summary of the first 4 steps. So when it comes time to study, the way that I would study is I would literally do the same thing. You open up your textbook and you open up your notes, but now your notes are in front of you, okay? And you start reading through your notes, because that's going to be the best summary of everything that was in that course. You got it? Does that make sense? Okay, your notes are the hub of where you're putting all your information. Okay, and your book is next to you to reference and start filling in the questions. Because now when you're studying for an exam, you've been separated from that information perhaps for several weeks or months. But when you go back to your notes, it's going to feel familiar, because you've had so much exposure and so much connection with those notes. Okay, so many opportunities to be exposed to the information. So, step 5, do the work. So practice your knowledge. Okay? Can anyone think of how you could practice your knowledge? Give me some ideas. Yep.
You can do questions.
Questions, yeah. What, like write questions yourself, or?
The ones that they give you in the textbook.
Excellent, good one. Yeah. So answer the questions that are in the textbook. Fantastic. Yep.
You want to do flashcards?
Flashcards, yep, absolutely, yeah. So definitely writing it down, being eloquent with that information, and putting it into sort of bite-sized chunks of information. Anyone else have any ideas?
Try to explain the concept to someone who's never heard of it.
Beautiful. Tell someone else. Share the information. Okay? Anyone else have any ideas? It's not until you teach that you really know something. Okay? When I took biochemistry in school, there were so many people that failed biochemistry that there were a group of 5 of us that decided we were all going to try to help each other. And we just divided every day's lecture into chunks and said, okay, I'll talk about this, you talk about that, and you talk about this. And we get together in an evening, a day or 2 later, and we just basically just teach each other what we heard, what we learned about. But what it would do is force us to really, really learn some part of it, and then teach the other ones. And then we'd sit down and we'd be the students, okay? And we just rotate the 5 of us, and we got the best marks in biochemistry. Sorry, someone else had a comment here? Yeah?
I was going to say, if you could make like a mind map.
Mind maps, amazing. Yeah, I love mind maps. They're excellent. Yeah. Everyone knows what mind maps are? Like that's super kind of creative. Like, yeah, I can see lots of thumbs up there. Yeah, mind maps are super fun. Antonio? What's that? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, so mind maps are really good fun. And like with Notability, I'll often just add to those notes, okay? And you can create new files and just try to write something as though you're going to teach it to someone else, okay? So, consider how you would use the knowledge. Okay? Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to add one thing. If you can't have a discussion with someone and go through a work group like you described, it may sound silly, but just reading it out loud is another way to really learn.
Absolutely, yeah. Reading out loud, saying things into a mirror. You know, especially if you're going to be presenting something, standing in front of a mirror and doing it, or recording yourself. You know, with your phone, and then watch yourself, and then you can critique what I could have said better. You know, not as a sort of personal sort of difficult thing, but it's like just trying to help yourself. Anyone else have any other ideas? So when you consider how you're going to use the knowledge, then it makes all that application better. When I was studying neurology, we had an assignment every day, which was after the lecture. Well, we were studying on the weekends, so I studied as a doctor in Monday to Friday, and I studied as a neurologist on Saturday and Sunday. So I had 7 days of school for 2 years of my medical training. So that was pretty intense. But the way I got through it was just reviewing the information. I used to record lectures and listen to them again and again. But we had an assignment every weekend, which was write down the breadth, the depth, and the application of everything you just learned this weekend. So initially, every single thing we had to say, well, this is the scope of what we're talking about when we're talking about the peripheral nervous system. Okay? This is the structure of the peripheral nervous system. This is what is the purpose of the nervous system. You have to talk about the whole breadth of it, and then the depth, all of the components and how they all work together, and then how that is applied, what is the output and function of the peripheral nervous system. This is a great tool. Breadth, depth, and application are really great considerations. To do coursework, we had that answer. Answer questions, yep, that was good. Practice eloquence, so like writing your, sharing it, and writing your flashcards. Write summaries, flashcards, map it out, draw the process, whatever it takes, do it to, and share it with others. Do it in a way that's going to allow you to really feel like you've mastered that subject, okay? This is something that you have to do on a daily basis. So the sort of bad news of today is it just means you have to do this work every day. But how long is it going to take you? Okay, you're going to have to read the book anyway, right? Hopefully. You're going to have to take notes anyway. So that's all. Those are all sort of standard times. How much more time am I suggesting that you use with these study techniques? 2 minutes to skim, and 2 or 3 minutes to review your notes. Okay? That's it. There's no extra time. But the critical components are that you have to skim before you hear the lecture. You have to review your notes after the lecture. And you have to read the textbook the same day. Okay? And also add to your notes. Okay? And when you have that repetition in one day, you stay involved in the process. You stay involved in the story until you've heard the whole story. You've got the whole breadth of the story, the whole depth of the information, and you follow the whole flow of its application because you've done the coursework as well. Does everyone get it? Has anyone ever heard that kind of stuff before? Probably not. I never heard it before. But I promise you, this will change your study environment. It will change your whole course of how you your student career will continue. Okay? If you do these things, you'll do some work each day. Okay? But it's sort of like saving pennies each day, but you don't really feel it. Okay? Once you get in the routine of doing these things every day, when it comes time to study, you can just look at your notes and you can take the test. Not maybe a little bit of a bragging thing, but not really. It's just to illustrate the point that when I studied as a doctor, we had to take 4 sets of national board exams, okay? And the 4th board exam lasted for days, where you have real patients in front of you with real conditions, and you have 1 minute with each patient to diagnose the patient, okay? And we have x-rays, or the x-rays put up in front of you, and you have either 30 seconds or a minute to make the diagnosis, okay? And it's one after another. The bell rings, you go to the next one. Boom, next x-ray. Boom, next x-ray. Boom, next x-ray. For days. Real patients, taxing every single thing we've learned in school, and people fail a lot, okay? Most people fail at least one of the board exams. And most people will take specialized courses for weeks or even months before each board exam to try to get all that information back into their head, or maybe even learn it for the first time before they take their board exams. I was fortunate enough to know all of these study skills before I went to my medical training, and I did this all the way through. I did this all the way through. When I got to every board exam, all I did was before the board exam, I would look through my notes, okay? I had no stress because as I was going through the notes, I was just going, yeah, I know that, I know that, I know that, because I've just been working it in and I felt so connected to the information. And I've been using it on a daily basis. So once you do each day of study, you know it, it's with you, okay? It's in you, okay? So I never really had to remind myself or to relearn it because it stayed with me. So I didn't do any prep for I never paid anyone for a course to prepare me for my medical board exams, and I passed all of them the first time very well. So not saying it to brag, but I'm saying it to tell you that this will work, okay? So what do you do next? Practice all 5 steps. Don't forget number 3, read your notes. Improve your flow of each step, okay? So I'm just getting you guys started, okay? I'm getting you started. I'm gonna give you, when I finish, we'll take a few minutes and we'll just have some questions because I'm sure you have questions. But you're also gonna have to find your own way. These are just, I wanna try to keep it as loose as possible so that you can find your own way. There's some, the 5 steps have to be there, but you'll find your own way to take notes. You might find a new technique for skimming. You know, whatever it is, you'll find your way. But you need to try to look at how you're doing within the flow of each of those and try to improve it. Maybe you're skimming, you're like, man, it's taking me 5 minutes to skim that book. I gotta get better at that because I know that when I skim faster, my alertness just amps up. Be consistent. When you practice this, you're gonna get rewards immediately. Every single day you do this, you're gonna close your book and you're gonna go, that was pretty easy actually, you know? You're not dragging your eyeballs anymore. You're reading it, you're like, oh yeah, this is cool, aha, oh, I'm getting the answers that I wanted. This all makes more sense now. You feel more engaged and you get excited about it, okay? Because school should be exciting. And you're going to add tools to each step. So you're, like I said, you're gonna improve your tools and you're gonna enjoy the process. So that's all that I need to say, okay? All that I wanted to say. I know there's a lot in there. Does anyone have any questions or challenges in the, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think stress can negatively affect how you do it in the exam?
Yes, most definitely. Now, if you go, you can put your hand down. I'll get to you in a second. If you're stressed, it's probably because you're unsure of whether you know the information or not, or you're unsure of what they're going to ask you about it. Okay, but if you do know the information, and you know how to the breadth, depth, and the application of information. People can throw anything at you, and you're going to feel confident in it. Okay, so confidence is really a measure of your own awareness of what you know, and whether that's equal to what your expectations of the course are. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me tell you one other thing. There's 2 things that I experienced in my academic career that really changed my ability to learn and retain information. One of them was this, but there's another one. You want to know, or should we leave that for another lecture? You want to know?
Yeah.
Meditation. Okay? Has anyone ever heard of meditation? Probably. Okay? You know, you can just sort of stare at your belly button or whatever, I don't know. There's lots of different ways of meditating, either in something called transcendental meditation, which is amazing. But meditation, what meditation does is it's sort of like when you have your phone and you kind of hit that button where you see like all the apps open and you kind of start closing apps, right? What meditation is it just kind of closes all the apps and all the other stuff is happening in the background of your brain so that when you try to focus on something, you can be completely focused on that thing, okay? That's what meditation does. And what stress is kind of like when you have, you know, all the sort of background worries in your head kind of in the forefront in front of your face, okay? So if you can kind of start getting in the practice of shutting those things down and just putting that aside for a moment, then you can really focus all of the power of your brains, okay? One of the things you're all going to discover now, and then you've been kids until this point, okay? Don't mean to break it to you, but you are now adults, okay? And as adults, you're going to discover new capacities in your brain. You're going to be discovering new paradigms and ways of looking at things, okay? I'll give you a brief example. When I went to school and started studying chiropractic, we were taught that things didn't work because there was a nerve being pinched, okay? And the nerve was being pinched because of something that was stuck in your neck. Okay, that was the paradigm. Okay, but then I started studying neurology, and I realized that, well, if something's actually pinching your nerve, you're actually killing the nerve. So if you take that pinch away, the nerve is still dead. So how do we see function immediately afterwards? What did that do? What did that do to the paradigm? Okay, that doesn't work, right? I had a teacher once who was talking about phantom limb pain. You know, when someone loses a limb and they have pain, they're like, "Oh, doc, my hand hurts." You're like, "Well, I don't mean to be rude, but you don't have a hand anymore, right?" And you're like, "Doc, it still hurts." That's what phantom limb pain is. People heard that before? So I asked my teacher once, I said, he thought I was being a bit of a smart aleck, right? But I said, "Doc, for whatever the mechanism is of phantom limb pain, could you have phantom limb pain if you still had the limb?" Okay, so what is the mechanism of phantom limb pain? I'll tell you quickly. Is that when your joints are moving, it's stimulating what we call fine touch receptors, and those movement receptors inhibit pain. But when those receptors are no longer there, you can't inhibit pain anymore. Okay, the pain doesn't happen in your arm, it happens in your brain. So the movement is actually inhibiting the pain in your brain, and if you don't have the movement, you can't inhibit pain, and those pain neurons start to become active and you feel pain. Okay? So, excuse me, so if you have a joint that isn't moving very effectively, are you more likely to experience pain? Yes, through the same mechanism as phantom limb pain. You get it? It's just a different paradigm. It's a different way of looking at things. And so as you're going through your career, you really have to keep your mind open and to be questioning. Start asking big questions. Maybe your teachers are wrong. Okay? Maybe they're wrong. Okay? And I would welcome you to question them. Okay? Because there's no teachers in the room right now and they can't hear me. But question your authorities. Okay? Because there's always more over the horizon. Someone else had a question? Yeah, you had a question?
I was just going to say, do you think the reading part of the 5 steps is essential, or can you watch videos?
Okay, great. Really, really good point. Really good point. I'm glad you asked that. What was your name? Jonathan. Excellent point. Jonathan asks, is it really important that you read the book, or can you watch a video on it? Okay? I would say that it's a personal thing. I personally think that reading is important. However, I will say, then videos are a great resource. What also is a great resource is the internet. You know, just have a tab open where you can Wikipedia something or find some other scientific journals or research, whatever it is. Use the internet to find answers, but the key is to not get too distracted in it. You know, you just want to grab some information, put it all together, keep it like an active thing. Okay. Because you can just kind of go down that whole slippery slope with watching videos online, and then suddenly you're watching videos about someone, I don't know, seeing if their phone case is going to work when they drop their phone out of a plane. So, what else? Anyone has some more questions? I saw some hands waving around a little bit. Yeah, at the back.
I just have a question about skimming.
Yeah.
I would like to understand a little bit that machine reading how it's different from encoding at this stage. It's just really allowing the subconscious to capture whatever it is.
So one of the things that I think might be useful for everyone to do is try it and then watch some videos on skimming, okay? Because there's lots of different ideas and perspectives on it. But what I can tell you is the information that I gave you about it is good information. Try to go as fast as you can. You'll get better results by going faster, okay? Because what it's going to do is you don't like to miss things. Your brain is going to try to see as much as possible. So if you're only getting a snapshot here and here and here and here, what's going to happen is instead of doing snapshots like this where you're reading, okay, when you're taking big snapshots like this, your visual acuity, not visual acuity, your sort of the scope of what you can see in each little snapshot is bigger. Okay? And you actually remember that stuff that you're seeing. It stays in your short-term memory. So even though it feels like you're just kind of putting your eyes over the words and not capturing much, you are getting it. Okay? Any more questions before we wrap up? Great. I'm going to stick around. If anyone has any questions, you can come to me. But thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.